The Political Depravity of Journalist Christopher Hitchens by David Walsh, 5 October 2001. A historical turning point has this benefit. It brings out an individual's true political physiognomy. What has been extraneous or cosmetic falls away, and the essence emerges. Such is the case with journalist Christopher Hitchens, The Nation, Vanity Fair, who has in the past been known as a left critic of American society, a dispenser of piquant comments about the foibles of the establishment. Most of those who followed his writings did so for that reason. However, Christopher Hitchens' recent comments on the September 11th World Trade Center attack indicate that he has irretrievably passed over to the extreme right. His permanent and final political identity, which was always the essential one, has now solidified. The British-born Hitchens hitched his wagon to the star of the U.S. political and military establishment during the Bosnia and Kosovo conflicts, as one of the most fervent advocates of American intervention in the Balkans against the Milosevic regime in Serbia. The columnist cultivated a relationship with the ultra-right through his promotion of the anti-Clinton impeachment drive. He served on one occasion as fingerman for the House Republicans, signing an affidavit at the request alleging that Sidney Blumenthal, a Clinton aide, had provided him with information disparaging to Monica Lewinsky. This was part of an effort to set up Blumenthal on a perjury charge. Similarly, Hitchens lined up with Bush forces in the aftermath of the theft of the November 2000 election, making liberal self-pity and mobbish Democrats his chief targets. In two recent articles in The Nation, Against Rationalization and Of Sin, the Left, and Islamic Fascism, and one in the British Spectator, The Fascist Sympathies of the Soft Left, Hitchens has taken to task, quote, leftists, end quote, whom he asserts are rationalizing the September 11 attack on the World Trade Center as just or partially just payback for U.S. policies in the Middle East. Hitchens singles out the following comment of Sam Husseini of the Institute of Public Accuracy in Washington, D.C. Quote, the fascists, like bin Laden, could not get volunteers to stuff envelopes if Israel had withdrawn from Jerusalem like it was supposed to, and the U.S. stopped the sanctions and bombing on Iraq. End quote. Hitchens is outraged by the suggestion that the attack in New York had any connection to U.S. policy in the Middle East. He prefers to attribute the action of the suicide pilots to the Islamic fanaticism of a sect whose, quote, grievances and animosities predate even the Balfour Declaration, let alone the occupation of the West Bank. The gates of Vienna would not have had to fall to the Ottoman Jihad before any bomb could begin to be applied to these psychic wounds. This is ahistorical and at its heart racist, chauvinist nonsense. There is not a great leap from this position to the Bush administration's worldwide crusade of good versus evil, or the ravings of Silvio Berlusconi, Italy's notoriously corrupt right-wing prime minister, who proclaimed the need for a, quote, Western crusade, or, quote, civilized values, end quote. By proclaiming the absence of any socio-historical circumstances that might have played a role in the recent attack, Hitchens evades making any assessment of the Middle Eastern political and economic situation. Any such analysis would have to take into account the responsibility of the U.S. and of other major powers for the denial of Palestinian democratic rights and national aspirations, the mass murder of Iraqis, and the horrible conditions that generally prevail in the region. This does not mean that the Islamic fundamentalist movements are progressive or have any genuine anti-imperialist credentials. They are, in fact, deeply reactionary and hostile to the interests of the working class and the oppressed masses. However, It is ludicrous to deny any link between American policies and the ability of such movements to find recruits, and even in some countries, a degree of popular sympathy. In his recent articles, Hitchens also attacks Noam Chomsky, the linguist and radical critic of U.S. foreign policy, for comparing the cruise missile attack launched by the Clinton administration on Sudan in August 1998 to the September 11th terror attack on the World Trade Center. Hitchens writes, "To mention this banana republic degradation of the United States in the same breath as a plan deliberated for months to inflict maximum horror upon the innocent is to abandon every standard that makes intellectual and moral discrimination possible." End quote. The World Socialist website has clearly defined political differences with Chomsky, but his response to Hitchens is appropriate. He notes that the cruise missile raid on Khartoum, quote, destroyed half the pharmaceutical supplies of a poor African country and the facilities for replenishing them, with an enormous human toll, end quote. He cites an article in the Boston Globe which reported that a year after the attack, quote, without the life-saving medicine the destroyed facilities produced, Sudan's death toll from the bombing has continued quietly to rise. Thus, tens of thousands of people, many of them children, have suffered and died from malaria, tuberculosis, and other treatable diseases. End quote. We part company with those elements on the petty bourgeois left, including Chomsky, when they suggest that the terror attack was in some fashion or another a legitimate act of retribution for past crimes committed by the U.S. government and military. However, we regard with contempt, as moral eunuchs in Trotsky's words, those who feel sympathy only for innocent Americans who are killed and turn a blind eye to the victims of U.S. atrocities around the world, whether it be the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the carpet bombing of North Vietnam, the deliberate killing of hundreds of Iraqi women and children in the Al-Maria bomb shelter in the Persian Gulf War, or the bombing of bridges and trains in Serbia, and the list could be considerably extended. Hitchens concludes this attack on Husseini and Chomsky in this fashion. I have no hesitation in describing this mentality carefully and without heat as soft on crime and soft on fascism. No political coalition is possible with such people, and, I am thankful to say, no political coalition with them is now necessary. It no longer matters what they think. End quote.